Well, Sherrod Brown, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, nails it. I mean, that derailment in Palestine, Ohio, is a microcosm of corporate America. And remember, under the Trump administration, all kinds of safety regulations were retracted for these railroads, braking systems, etc. Things that would have probably prevented this type of accident. Also, who knows, maybe the redesign of these containers that carry these dangerous types of chemicals, etc. If there were more regulations, it would be mitigated. I want you to take a look at this, though. There's a good possibility that the folks of Palestine, Ohio, are some of those who bought into, we don't want all that regulations. You know, the corporations have put out ads that try to make one believe that regulations are a bad thing, and somehow regulations cost corporations too much money, and in the process it hurts employment and all that bull. But then you get these derailments. And again, this is one that was really, really bad because it probably polluted the entire city of Palestine. And we don't know while they say the water is safe to drink, they don't know what chemicals are there they didn't test for. And burning these chemicals create chemicals that they're not going to be testing for. The fact that people have a smell in the air, the fact that all these, the soot and all of this stuff fell all over in people's homes and people's land and people's fields, it tells you there is something wrong there, something created by corporations. Now, I want you to listen to Sherrod Brown, and then I want to talk a little bit later about some of the things that he mentioned that's very, very important.
The governor say that the municipal water and the air, they are both safe, but residents, they are worried about contamination, and some say they've gotten rashes, sore throats, nausea, and headaches, as I just pointed out. Senator Brown, you were just there this week on Thursday. Should the residents of East Palestine accept the assurances from the government, or are they right to be skeptical?
Well, they're right to be skeptical. The EPA administrator, when I was there, both the state and the federal EPA administrators said that, but when you return to your home, we think the water's safe, but when you return to your home, you should be tested again for your water and your soil and your air, not to mention those that have their own wells. So, this is Pamela, this is really the same old story. Corporations do stock buybacks. They do big dividend checks. They lay off workers. Thousands of workers have been laid off from Norfolk Southern. Then they don't invest in safety rules and safety regulations, and this kind of things happens. That's why people in East Palestine are so upset. They know that corporate lobbyists have had far too much influence in our government, and they see this as the result. And this kind of thing shouldn't happen. There was also a Norfolk Southern derailment in Sandusky on Lake Erie in Ohio. There was one just a few days ago in Detroit. These things are happening because the railroads are simply not investing the way they should in car safety and in the rail lines themselves.
Yeah, I was just reading, I believe it was in the New York Times, that this company, Norfolk Southern, invested more for stockholders to gain more of a profit than in safety improvements recently.
The whole idea of you had to flee your home because a railroad failed to do its job, as the executives and their lobbyists get richer and richer and richer. And there's something very wrong with that. But when you see the faces of the fire chief and the face of Ms. Ferguson, it really strikes you that we've got a lot to do to fix this, to make rail safer, to fight against lobbyists who keep trying to weaken these rules as they did 3 or 4 years ago. That's why I'm angry when I look at these companies lay people off. They never look out for their workers. They never look out for their communities. They look out for stock buybacks and dividends. Something's wrong with the corporate America, and something's wrong with Congress and administrations listening too much to corporate lobbyists.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
That's got to change. I mean, that's the fight I make.
Let's talk about that, because regulations for rail companies are coming under renewed scrutiny now. Companies are working under looser restrictions for toxic chemicals. They're using Civil War era braking technology. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg suggested this week that his department was constrained by law on some areas of rail regulation But Democrats just held unified control of government for 2 years. Does Congress deserve some blame here for failing to regulate? And what more could be done?
Well, I know this, that 3 or 4 years ago, every time there's a new administration, particularly a more conservative one that's more pro-corporate, they put all these regulations on the table about safety, about worker safety, community safety, the environment, consumer protections, and at the behest of lobbyists, far too often they weaken those laws. That happened 3, 4, 5 years ago. I've urged President Biden by phone yesterday. I've urged Secretary Buttigieg by phone yesterday to make sure that they look at all these rules and strengthen them. Part of it's on Congress. Congress has got to do its job better, but there's simply, Pam, as you know, Pamela, there's simply too much influence by corporate lobbyists in Washington, and it's terrible in Republican administrations. It's not all that great in Democratic administrations sometimes. So that's my job to push the administration and to move in Congress on more pro-consumer, pro-worker, pro-environment laws and pro-community safety laws to make sure these things don't happen.
Now let's get real. You know, all these corporations say that if we reduce regulations, if we reduce the taxes on these folks, somehow, it's going to benefit the common man, the average person that actually sustained these corporations by buying their products. But that's not what happens. What happens is, as soon as they get a break, as soon as they get a tax break, as soon as they get a tax cut, as soon as they get a regulations that allow them to operate more, quote, efficiently, not efficiently, but more recklessly is more the point of it. They don't give those savings by reducing the price of their products. Hey, after all, if they did that, guess what a reduction in price would have done to our inflation rate? Oh, the inflation rate would drop. So we don't get the savings from these corporations. Instead, all these tax breaks that these corporations get, all these declines in regulations that these corporations get, all these advances that these corporations get didn't cause a drop in price. In fact, they increased their price on the product above and beyond the benefits that they're getting, which is the definition of inflation. So while the corporations are telling you, look at what the administration is doing, not fighting inflation, it is they who are responsible for inflation. When they got their breaks, they bought back their stocks to inflate the price of their stock. They increased the amount of dividends, or they gave these results in the form of dividends, meaning free cash to the people who own the company. So your money going into the hands of a few, as you pay more, as you get less regulations, as you get Palestine, Ohio. That is capitalism at its best. That is the definition. The efficient allocation of resources for those who own the resources, for those who manipulate the resources. That's what it's all about. So whenever you are there listening and defending and trying to call those who are trying to protect you and everybody else, that somehow they are a pinko liberal, a pinko communist, or whatever, remember these incidents. Remember, these incidents are caused by a lack of regulations. These incidents are caused by the maximization of profits at all cost without thinking about humanity. Now, those people's lives in Palestine, Texas will never be the same again. They've all inhaled the crap. What happens to them down the road? We don't know. But again, it's not the only derailment that occurred in the last couple of weeks. There are several other derailments that occurred in the last couple of weeks with different levels of severity. Some that they claim had no leaks, etc. But we know probably in the groundwater in those areas there will be issues. So please listen to those of us that are trying to provide the services, the regulations, etc. for us all, for our environment. because those guys have no passion for you. The CEO went to Palestine, Ohio twice, undercover. He was scared that the pitchforks may come out. Well, you know what, folks? It is time for us, our voting pitchforks, and start electing people that are going to be there, not to allow the wealthy stockholder, the corrupt, thuggish executives that then come with a smile or in a meek form, that they weren't meek when they were asking for, or when they were giving away your profits as dividends, or rather, their profits from extorting you as dividends. They weren't trying to be humane when they forced government by paying them off to give them tax cuts. And now many are going to want government to mitigate the actual damage done by this corporation. Because you know what? If it gets too bad and the cost gets too high, they're just going to go bankrupt and open under a different name. Folks, it's time. Nationalize the railroads, because we are going to end up cleaning it up anyway. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.